Welcome back to the Ed Morrissey Show. Today is Thursday, November 19th, 2015, and the first snows are flying around here in the Twin Cities. Laughing his rear end off as usual on Thursdays in the fall and winter is Duane, Generalissimo Patterson of the Hugh Hewitt Show, at Radio Blogger on Twitter, and of course the master of the universe. I guess you can't be a guardian of the galaxy, but you can be a master of the universe. I think that's how I'm going to introduce you from now on.
Master of the universe. Okay, that's fine. I'll take it. Good to be back on, and I will have you know, the local mountains here. The Big Bear Range. The whatever they call them, the San Gabriel Mountains.
San Gabriel's, yeah.
They have snow on them.
Is that San Gabriel? Or is that Angeles Crest?
There's Angeles Crest Highway. I don't know. I mean, they're not really mountains. They're just kind of.
They got snow. They've finally got some snow. I think you guys
got some snow.
Got a foot of snow, right?
Yeah.
So the drought's over?
As far as I'm concerned, it is. Jerry Brown seems to have a different idea, but
Jerry Brown's got some interesting ideas.
He's got all sorts of interesting ideas.
Did you see where he pushed?
You know what the fun part about Jerry Brown is? He got onto a conference call with a bunch of Republican governors and one other Democrat named Maggie Hassan over in New Hampshire. And as welcoming as Jerry Brown has always been to immigrants, because he sees voters where other people see, potential problems.
Yep.
He saw a situation where, we don't exactly know who these people are, so I'm just going to hop on this call because I'm sure I'm Jerry Brown. I'm a Democrat. I've got their western flank. They'll answer my questions. So he decided to ask some questions about, so how can you assure us that you're vetting all these people from coming in from Syria accurately so that we know whether we have an issue or not? And the only response Jerry Brown, good long-standing Democrat, got from the White House is, shut up.
Shut up, they explained.
Shut up, they explained. You will take them and you will say, thank you, sir, may I have another?
Yeah, this is, let me do my impression here of Jerry Brown. It might be a good idea. Might be a good idea if we, if maybe we had a little bit more access to the information on these refugees. White House. No, it wouldn't be.
Not going to happen.
Well, how about a little bit of cooperation with our local law enforcement? So in case there are problems with these guys, we can find out right away and do something about it.
Yeah, that makes for really nice talking points, and I'm glad you raised it. But let me tell you something, there, old timer, it ain't going to happen.
Did you see what happened? By the way, the phone call, the conference call that you're talking about was Dennis McDonough and Tom. Oh gosh, I can't think of his name now. He's the national security guy. You know who I'm talking about,
right?
Tom Donilon. Thank you. Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Dennis McDonough and Jay Johnson went up to Capitol Hill today to carry Obama's pail of water. Jay fell down and broke his crown, and Dennis came tumbling after. Apparently, they actually lost votes among the Democratic caucus after their presentation on the refugee bill.
I get the understanding that if we say no, then the terrorists win. We give them a propaganda stuff. I mean, I don't agree with it, but I understand the loony left trying to spin their way out of this. I understand what they're trying to do.
Yeah, I understand what they're trying to do too. They're trying to get out from underneath an extremely unpopular policy. Did you see the polling on this?
Oh, it's like,
it's 2-1. It's 53-28, almost 2-1. It's 53-28.
It's almost getting down to the point where you're polling the American people. Who'd you rather, an Al-Qaeda member or a member of mainstream media? And which one's losing? It's kind of getting down to that kind of level.
It kind of is, yeah.
So, no, the thing about this whole policy is, and I've heard lots of people say lots of things. In fact, Chris Christie's going to be on again this week, reprising his appearance from earlier this week that got him a little attention that I don't think he thought he was going to.
Well, come on. I mean, I understand the reluctance to use the current system, but I'm not going to worry about orphaned infants coming into the country. I mean,
hey, we didn't make him say it.
I know you didn't make him say it. That's the point. I mean, that's an unforced error. I mean, that's
Governor Christie's going to come on today because apparently what he said has been used as a 2x4 by everybody on the left for the last 4 days. You think? So we will see. We will see if he walks that back a smidge. I don't know. I mean, we'll see how that goes.
I mean, there's a good argument for holding up until we get this process fixed, because this is a process that's already had problems in the past. ABC News today reminded everybody of their 2013 expose on this, in which dozens of refugees from countries which we knew a hell of a lot better, Iraq and Afghanistan, came in here and were two of them at least were Al Qaeda.
I think, by and large, most of the candidates are kind of in the same place, which is they're really not interested in taking a whole lot more unless we can do some serious vetting and do more vetting than what we think we already are doing now, which isn't working. I mean, there's variations of how militant or how open and accepting we are, but by and large, most of the candidates are in the same place. We don't mind taking refugees if we can verify that they are legitimate refugees and not, terrorists in refugee clothing, right?
Right, yeah. But you have to have information to be able to discern
all
those
the Republicans are pretty much in the same place. The people that aren't in the same place are the Democrats. They don't seem to care. They just think, trust us, we know what we're doing. Well, nobody trusts you, not even other Democrats, as the vote went in the House of Representatives today. No. A veto-proof majority, by the way, in the House, which is really interesting.
Well, and when you have Jerry Connolly telling Barack Obama, you're being too partisan about this, you need to work with the Republicans a little bit on Jerry Connolly.
That's
Jerry Connolly.
That's like the Irish saying, if everybody tells you you're drunk, you better sit down.
Yeah, I mean, Steve Israel. Steve Israel, former DCC chair, right? I mean, these guys are bare-knuckle partisan
in the
players.
House or something like that in Democratic caucus.
Yeah, well, I mean, Jerry Connolly, I know he's got he's a ranking member on something now, but I mean, he was a chair of something when Democrats had the majority. But Steve Israel was running the House campaign committee for the Democrats. These are two guys who know how to do partisan politics, and they're both telling Dennis McDonough and Jay Johnson, you need to tell your boss to start working with the Republicans rather than trying to get a partisan fight out of this thing. I mean, I don't know how much more how much more can you possibly be isolated than Steve Israel and Jerry Connolly telling you you're being too partisan on this, President?
Well, I thought that of all the candidates out there that had the best take on this, I thought Marco Rubio actually had the best take on it, which is, look, I have no problems taking more Syrian refugees here, and I think we should take more Syrian refugees here. Here's the problem. We physically can't right now. And when he means by can't, he means our first job is to ensure and protect the homeland.
Right.
And we already know that we can't vet them because there is no there from which to check. There is no, as the FBI director, James Comey, told Congress a couple of days ago on the Hill, look, we can do these queries, but when you do a query, when they came from Iraq, we kind of knew what was going on in Iraq, and there was at least a stable government there when we were doing these queries, and we had a pretty good tell about whether or not this person that was applying to come in was a good guy or a bad guy. We can query all we want, and if nothing comes back, that doesn't mean that, hey, they're clear, it's aces, everything's fine. It just means that we're not getting an answer, and we're not going to get an answer because Syria's not going to cooperate. Worth a damn.
Right. And there's a couple of points here to be made too, because I agree with Marco Rubio. Look, if we were able to,
if we could assure the security aspect of this, which is everybody's first job, or it should be, if we could make sure that the vetting process is a secure way to rule out to the best of human ability, then welcome them. I have no problem with that.
Right.
But we can't do that now because the system, and it's not just our system, it's because of Syria being broken, because of this failed foreign policy, because of all this going on.
Well, not only that.
We can't do it.
Not only that. I mean, when you're talking about Iraq and Afghanistan, I mean, we were the boots on the ground in those places. And so it was a government that was allied with us in both of these cases that produced this paperwork, that did this vetting, that gave us the background. We had a lot better intel on the ground in those places. Syria is a completely opposite situation. Here you have a government who is hostile to us, who has every reason to try to palm off the worst elements that are still remaining in Syria to get them out of out of Bashar Assad's.
We have a country in which it's quote, well, it's not even a legitimate government. It's de facto government dictatorship. Hates us and won't cooperate with us and will lie.
Wait. This guy's a reformer.
Oh, that's right.
Hillary Clinton was saying as late as 2011, maybe 2002. Was it 2011? Okay, so I was right the first time, that Bashar Assad was a reformer. He was a reformer, and we could work with this guy.
So you've got that element who hates us, will lie to us, and has actually gone out of its way to attack us in some cases, using cyber attacks and things like that. So you've got that. You've got in the eastern part of the country, and actually a whole chunk of the country, you've got a terrorist group that is now setting up a caliphate whose express interest is to make sure that we all die. And then you've got a small group of people scattered all over the place that are supposedly our allies, except we haven't done anything to protect them, and we haven't done anything to really help them or train them effectively, and basically they're getting picked off left, right, and sideways by the Russians.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean the situation is screwed up.
So when Barack Obama says, "Trust me, we know what we're doing," sorry,
well,
Sparky.
that's the other point too, right? Is that there is no trust. This was a guy, and we haven't talked since Paris. I mean, Paris was on Friday. The last time we talked was on Thursday. On Friday morning, what was Barack Obama? Well, I mean, they did the interview on Thursday, but on Friday morning, ABC aired an interview. Friday morning, ABC aired an interview between George Stephanopoulos and Barack Obama. What was Barack Obama's message on ISIS?
On the morning before the attack?
Yeah, that morning.
Oh, yeah, they were contained.
They're contained. ISIS is contained. They're not gaining strength. They're declining in strength. We are, our policy is working. And within hours, they were conducting a Mumbai-style major terrorist attack in Paris. It was kind of a combination of Mumbai and Beslan, and it was effective, unfortunately. And and before that, just a couple of weeks before that, they had brought down a Russian charter jet that took out of Sharm el-Sheikh. Right. They conducted bombing attacks in Beirut, although to be fair, the Lebanese government still disputes that, but they took credit for it. This is a group that is expanding. It's not being contained. It's expanding its operations beyond its borders. And this was always the risk with ISIS.
And for the next 5 days, instead of reacting in a similar fashion to what Hollande has reacted to over in France, at least rhetorically, saying, okay, bastards, we will do what it takes.
And Russia, for that matter, too. Russia doing the same after they determined that it was a bomb that brought down the jet. Yeah.
What do the Americans do? What does the American executive branch do? Whether it's Ben Rhodes, the Deputy National Security Advisor, whether it's John Kerry, whether it's you pick it. The official reaction from the White House for the next 5 days was why the analysis is inaccurate and why you have to understand Barack Obama was right about his rhetoric 4 hours before everybody saw he was full of crap.
Yeah. This is a real emperor.
All they were worried about was defending to the death the premise that everybody got shown to be 100% completely false.
Yeah.
As soon as the attack started, Barack Obama said they were contained. Well, he was clearly talking about containment, meaning they haven't, made their caliphate 100 yards bigger to the east. We've got them pinned in. They've got their caliphate and they're still dangerous, but it's not like they've taken over Baghdad. It's not like they've taken over Turkey. It's not like they've taken. Okay, so you're really going to die on that hill?
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, you're really going to die in that hill? We've got 130 dead, and you look like the biggest asshat to ever wear an asshat. And you're really going to go and spend 4 days on why your assessment that everybody knows was BS, that your assessment was technically accurate? I mean, honestly, that is this administration. The world is attacked. And the only thing that this president can seem to do is find a way to blast Republicans and try and make sure that you throw enough fog and confusion so that people won't see how wrong you are.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's really the strategy here is basically to muddy up the waters with as much partisan smearing as you possibly can get to cover up the fact that you've gotten this wrong. And here's the other part that really hasn't gotten a lot of attention yet. So immediately after the attacks in Paris, and immediately after the Russians finally admit that it was a bomb that brought down the charter jet in Sharm el-Sheikh, what do? What do both nations do? They start doing massive bombing runs on Raqqa. Now, the U.S. said, well, we were helping them out with some intel on the ground and giving them targets to pinpoint, which prompts the question, why weren't we targeting these things before? What were we doing? Were we ignoring Raqqa? I mean, I know we were bombing along the lines around Sinjar, and the Kurds took Sinjar back, in part because of the air support, the close air support that we were providing them. But why weren't we targeting Raqqa? I mean, we've got the ability to shoot cruise missiles too. I don't know if anybody realizes that, but we do.
I mean, hell, we could have dropped 2 Daisy cutters, and Raqqa's no longer there. I mean, we don't have to turn the whole place into a parking lot. But I mean, there are things that we can do to make things extremely difficult for life to sustain itself in Raqqa, and we don't seem to have the will because this president doesn't think that we have a place in the world for us to say what you're doing is wrong. I mean, again, look at what we saw in the Democratic debate. Hillary Clinton, Marty O'Malley, and Bernie Sanders. And as soon as John Dickerson, and God bless him, I wanted to kiss that man on the mouth because of the questions he asked in that first half hour of the debate. You can say what you want about the clown car that really is on the Democratic side, but that first half hour gave conservatives like you and me, especially in the media, more ammunition for the next 18 months than I could have ever possibly dreamed of mine out of a debate.
Yeah.
I mean, the stuff that everybody says Hillary Clinton won that debate because she had no competition in it. Hillary Clinton was absolutely awful in that debate.
It's a good thing nobody was watching it. We made Jazz watch it.
Which is why it is such a gold mine for people like us, because we're going to get to play audio for people that they wouldn't have otherwise heard because it was on a Saturday that nobody paid any attention to. But Hillary Clinton saying, I'm a product of the 60s? It doesn't get any better than that, does it?
No, it doesn't. I'm a product of the 60s.
As Marco Rubio said yesterday, look, I don't care if she's from the 60s. The problem is it's her ideas that are from the 60s, and that's what's out of date.
Right. Yeah.
And that was a perfect way to spin it. That way you're not falling into the, she's an old battle axe ageism stuff. It's just her policies are 50-year-old policies that don't work in today's real world, and that resonates with everybody.
Yeah, there's a comment in the chat room. I don't know if you're in the chat room or not.
Oh, I'm not in the chat
room.
But
I'm gonna paraphrase it. I think that what we heard you say is that they should pave Paradisus and put up a parking lot.
Now see, if I had a producer.
If I had a producer, and if I had an ASCAP license.
That too.
That too. All right. So yeah, back to Hillary though, and the debate. I mean, she also got caught up in the foreign policy thing and got all hung up in the weeds on that, which is interesting because that's supposed to be her strength.
She couldn't defend Libya. She had nothing on Libya. All she said was, look, Gaddafi was a bad guy and we got rid of him. Okay, yeah, but that's not what I asked you. What I asked you was, you were complaining about Bush for not having a plan to win the peace in Iraq. You toppled Gaddafi. Nobody says you didn't, but what did you leave behind? And she had nothing. I mean, nothing.
Nothing. Because her foreign policy is what is the result of her foreign policy is what we're seeing right now. And what she's trying to run on is, I was a great Secretary of State, and you're going to get that same foreign policy if you elect me. And it's a disaster. The only saving grace for Hillary Clinton is that most people don't vote for president based on foreign policy, which
You
is
saw,
absurd. But that's
you saw, and by extension, she's wrapped up in this too. But you saw what Barack Obama's numbers are on his ISIS policy right now.
yeah, they're way.
31% approve, 57 or something disapprove.
Yeah, it's
And
31-58, something like that.
And that poll was taken before the Paris
Yeah,
attack.
it was like the 3 days prior to the Paris attack. Yeah, it's a. I can't even wait to see what it's going to look like, after this week, because
I mean, there's a floor in there because theoretically, 25% of 25% of them are rabid Democrats that will never ever admit to anything that a Democrat can do wrong.
right, except for
But-
today up on Capitol Hill, which was interesting. But
But did you see what Harry Reid did up on Capitol Hill today?
I shudder to think.
Okay, so this thing passes in the House overwhelmingly, right?
Right.
Harry Reid says, don't worry about it. It's dead on arrival. It's going nowhere. It will be filibustered instantly. It will not even be allowed to get brought up for a vote. So Barack Obama will never have to cast his veto. We'll protect him.
Well, that doesn't surprise me. That's a strategy for everything, isn't it?
Of course it is. So what I'm saying is, for every Democrat, and honestly, Republicans, conservatives, people in the chat room, hear me when I tell you this. Every Democrat that is running against even a nominal conservative or a nominal Republican, if you don't think that you can, summon up the intestinal fortitude to support a Republican candidate this time, imagine this: every Democrat in the United States Senate right now is backing Harry Reid's play. Oh, now they won't say that. You'll have the Mansions, the Joe Mansions from West Virginia saying, "Oh, this is outrageous! This is outrageous! We should have a vote on this. I'd be happy to break with the president on this." There's lots of senators that will try and have it both ways, but they are backing Harry Reid's play. There are not 6 Democrats that are willing to put the country's security over a president's personal policy. And they are going to back that filibuster. Oh, they're going to say they're not going to. And a couple of them that are up for re-election, they're going to be given a hall pass to be able to try and do the show vote that, oh, yeah, we're our own independents. We're going to do our thing. Harry Reid is twisting every Democrat's arm, and every Democrat has even weaker leadership in that United States Senate than Barack Obama does in the White House, because they are letting Harry Reid dictate what they will and what they won't do, because the president's whims must be catered to at all costs.
Which is interesting because Obama's a lame duck. I mean, he's not running again for anything.
I understand that, but I think what you're seeing in the Democratic Party is they are trying to keep as many fingers in the dike as possible to plug all the holes as they can. If the perception really leaks out everywhere that, oh my God, we can't contain this anymore, we're really not contained here either, then all is lost. And if they perceive all is lost, then all is lost. They still think that if they can just keep enough fingers in enough of the holes to keep the majority of the water on the other side of the dam, then Hillary can somehow stumble her way in and on the women thing, and they'll all have protection for at least another 4 more years. That's what they think they're going to try and do. But if it's Katie bar the door because Obama has basically got a vote of no confidence everywhere with the American people, Congress, House, Senate, everywhere, then all really is lost for the Democrats.
Yeah.
It's a power play. It's not they're doing it because they have to. It's not they're doing it because they support Barack Obama necessarily. It's because they have to, because it's circling the wagons time.
Yeah, but they're circling the wagons around a guy whose personal popularity is still reasonably evident, but his policy popularity is not. I mean,
Right.
I think it's a mistake. Let's shift gears though to the Republican nomination.
Yeah.
Now, today, Mia Love came out and endorsed Marco Rubio.
Interesting.
I found that interesting too, and I mean, it was a full-throated endorsement. Mia Love very much is enthusiastic about Marco Rubio.
It's amazing to me how many conservatives, how many young conservatives, how many Tea Party types, if you will, are all of a sudden saying, "Hey, that Marco Rubio, he's really got something going for him." But I thought he was the establishment guy. All of a sudden, I thought somehow the narrative of Marco Rubio is he was the last firewall of the establishments in DC.
And here is my question. Now, I haven't written a post about this already, but it hasn't gone up yet because we've got other more hot topics that are coming up first. But I mean, I find it curious because first off, this is all upside for Marco Rubio. There's no downside for Marco Rubio to have Mia Love come out and endorse him. There's no downside to Marco Rubio.
Arguably the most popular incoming freshman in the House of Representatives.
She was. She was until she backed John Boehner. And then she got kind of crosswise with the Tea Party faction, the Freedom Caucus faction. And, some of the luster got rubbed off of Mia Love after that point. And I'm curious as to your thoughts on whether or not this helps Rubio or if it hurts Mia Love. because that same Freedom Caucus, there are people, and they're friends of ours, Duane, who really don't trust Marco Rubio after the Gang of Eight thing. Because he partnered with Chuck Schumer on comprehensive immigration. I mean, I see you shaking your head. I'm just going to I'm going to lay out their case.
I see nothing but upside long-term from Mia Love. I see nothing but upside from her. As far as everybody getting their knickers and out over John Boehner, in a year, we're not going to even remember John Boehner. Honestly, we're not. I think...
Sorry, John.
Huh?
Sorry, John.
Whatever.
We love you, pal. Have fun in retirement out there in Ohio.
I have a lot more confidence in Paul Ryan's leadership of the House than I did of John Boehner. So I
don't disagree.
I think we've turned the page, and I understand Republican groups. If you perceive to wrong certain people the wrong way once, they never forget, and you can never undo that. I get that. Did she lose some support with some people? Yeah. I see nothing but upside for me.
I don't think that. Yeah, I think you're right about the Boehner thing. I think that's more of a momentary thing that is going to, depending on what happens from here on in, of course. But I think they're gonna still be in Mia Love's corner. But I don't know that it's going to necessarily. I don't know that she's got the standing yet among that group to raise Rubio's standing among that group.
No, but I certainly don't think it hurts for Marco Rubio to say,
no, not at all. Like I said, it's all upside.
Here's a really articulate African American woman who built this whole legacy out of nothing, and showed this is how you do it.
Yeah.
Do endorsements help in the overall scheme of things? Not really, but it certainly doesn't hurt them.
And that's interesting too. I mean, in a normal cycle, I think it might. This is not a normal cycle, and endorsements might even be a little counterintuitive here because this is not a normal cycle. We've been talking about Donald Trump and Ben Carson, and I think it's fair to say that both of us thought that the bubble on both of these guys would probably start to have deflated about a month ago, and by now you'd start seeing either the governors emerge or Rubio and Cruz emerge as the
if you would have told me out of the 17 Republicans officially running for the nomination, if you would have told me the first three that drop out are governors, I would have thought you were on something.
Yeah,
because I really thought this was going to be a year of a governor.
Well, it's because we had a lot of them, right? And we thought that was going to matter. But again, in an anti-establishment cycle, apparently governors are still to establishment.
Three governors are gone, and there's three more that are.
On the cusp.
They're on life support.
They're on the cusp, right? I mean, Bush, Christie, and who's the third?
You could say Huckabee.
Oh, okay, that's right. Okay,
I mean, technically,
sorry. No, you're right.
He comes from the governor ranks.
He was a 3-term governor, I think, right, in Alabama.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Arkansas.
Kasich's not really catching on the way.
Kasich, of course. Yeah, Kasich. Well, that's Kasich's. The thing about Jindal too is that both of these guys, have you guys talked to Jim Garrity yet about Jindal dropping out? Because he really liked Jindal, and I really like Jindal too. But yeah,
how could you tell?
Yeah, a little angry.
Some posting.
Little angry. The problem with Jindal, I thought, was this, and it's the same thing with Kasich too, is that both of these guys kept trying to put on different personas rather than just be themselves. Bobby Jindal is a charming, funny, supremely intelligent guy who has policy like the back of his hand. Now, granted, in this cycle, that still might not have mattered, right? Because this isn't really about somebody who really knows policy. It's about being an outsider, and Jindal isn't.
It is a true modern day miracle that he not only got elected once but twice in Louisiana, and turned that state around the way he turned it around. I mean, especially as upside down and backwards.
Absolutely. I mean, Garrity's right about that. I mean, this is a guy who's really accomplished. For that matter, the same thing's true of Scott Walker.
Accomplishments a mile long.
Right.
It just didn't resonate and translate to the national
part. And in part too, though, is they didn't really run very good campaigns. Scott Walker was not prepared to run for a national campaign. Became kind of apparent about mid-spring. Jindal, I think, was, but he kept trying to be the most provocative guy in the field because I think he took the wrong lessons from
the Republican side. You can go back a long way and find that whoever our nominee and eventual president in some cases were, every time it wasn't their first rodeo. No. It wasn't their first campaign. Their first campaign didn't make it. Ronald Reagan's first campaign was unsuccessful. There is lots of, there's lots of upside for Jindal. There's lots of upside for Walker. They're both relatively young, politically speaking.
Yep.
There's no reason they can't take a cycle or two off and then, okay, what did I learn? What didn't work last time? And they can come back with much stronger campaigns. And what they have to offer that Rick Perry couldn't overcome was the one big gaffe on the national stage, which was a career ruiner. I mean, nobody could get over the
that and the indictment down there in Texas, because his fundraising just never really took off. People were worried about that was a guy I think who could have done something this cycle.
And I totally get that. But what I'm saying with Bobby Jindal, I mean, the worst thing I think you can point back to that was his biggest mistake was doing the whole juice box thing with, he had a moment here and a moment there, but he didn't really do anything to brand himself and hurt the brand, 4, 8, 12 years out. And neither did Scott Walker. So I still think they've got upside on a national stage somewhere if they really want to pursue that and maybe pick a different team and learn from what didn't work last time, and they could mount an even stronger campaign next time. I see no downside there. It just, what surprises me is I still don't know what is defying gravity with both Carson and Trump. Now, I mean, I get the popularity, I get the anti-DC sentiment.
Anti-DC, anti-PC sentiment.
I know, but
I mean, they're saying crazy things and it's not damaging them at all. Whereas, Jindal says juice box and he's out. He's out. It really wasn't the juice box comment that did it. I mean, he wasn't getting any traction prior to that either. But
his was a function of money. He didn't have enough money.
It was a function of money. It was a function of just not being himself. I mean, he was this miserable, kind of shrieking guy in these debates. And that's not Bobby Jindal. You've had Bobby Jindal on the show. I've talked to Bobby Jindal on the show.
I've talked to him off air. He is a delightfully funny guy.
He's got
a very wickedly witty sense of humor.
He does. He is, and it just never came across. He wasn't coming across. He wasn't being himself, and that's the problem. Authenticity is a big deal. Now, I'm not saying that if he had run as his authentic self, warm, funny, highly informed on policy, that he would have broken into the top tier, because it's just not that type of cycle. But I think he would have left himself in a lot better position for a future run for office if he had done that rather than doing what he did this time around.
So here's the question. I know Iowa's a caucus, so the analogy or the premise doesn't exactly fit, but how much of the Trump factor do you think is rock solid no matter what he does, no matter what he says, he's my guy, he can't say anything too stupid? And how much of it is people saying, yeah, he's making this a more entertaining thing to watch, but when they actually get behind the booth and they close the drape behind him and they've got to punch the button or hit or pull the lever or whatever they've got to do Do they say, I can't do it. I just can't do it. I know I told the pollsters. I know I told everybody I was going to be a big Trump guy or I was going to be a big Carson guy, but I can't do it.
I'll tell you this.
How much of that factor are we looking at?
I'd say not as much as you think there would be. And I'll tell you why I say that is because we had something very similar here in Minnesota about 17 years ago. And Jesse Ventura ended up with 38% of the vote and won a three-way race for governor. And it's the same thing. It's a guy who was basically emoting. He was letting his id run loose for a few months, and people ate it up. They thought it was entertaining. They didn't take it seriously. And to this day, you'll find people who still defend that vote. Oh, well, we wanted to shake things up. It was a disaster. I mean,
The belt buckle speech he gave last Friday.
well, how about the answer he gave to Yahoo News about, well, should there be warrantless searches of Muslims, and should you have special ID cards for Muslims? And he's saying, well, I can't rule either one of those things out.
I know.
This was supposed to be the libertarian cycle, right?
If a college professor at Missouri said that, I'd have called him a fascist.
Yeah. I mean, this was supposed to be sort of like the conservative libertarian cycle, right? The Rand Paul people were the Rand Paul people must be in apoplexy today reading this stuff, and yet their guy has got no traction in this cycle, none whatsoever. And Donald Trump is taking, it's a higher percentage now than it was last week. Why? Because people want to hear the emoting. And those who think Trump is sort of a clown show are voting for Carson instead. That's the cycle. And I got to be honest with you. I'm getting down to the point now where I'm thinking this is probably our leaderboard. And I think it's going to be our leaderboard rolling into Iowa. Is you're going to have Trump, Carson, Rubio, Cruz, and I don't know that
and everybody else.
Well, and Bush.
Bush isn't going to be. He's not going to be top four.
He'll be fifth.
He's not going to be Final Four.
Yeah, he's going to be fifth, but he's going to stick around for a while because he's got all the money with the super PAC. He doesn't have to get out. I think that's what we're looking at here. And I got to be honest with you. I'm getting to the point now where I think Trump's going to be the nominee. I don't see the board changing. I mean, Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz had two great debates in a row. Really did. Donald Trump had a lousy debate the last time.
I still can't believe that's going to happen because I knew when I watched the original Batman movie with Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson that I knew Jack Nicholson's character was going to lose. So I know the country's going to wise up to Donald Trump. And I know what you're going to ask me. Did I just compare Donald Trump to the Joker?
Maybe the Penguin. I don't know.
No, but you remember the Jack Nicholson character? I know what I'll do. I'll just make myself popular. Just spread the money around. Money, money, money. Who do you trust? Hubba, hubba, hubba. And he starts winning everybody over because he just throws money at him. Well, that's not exactly what Trump's doing, but
it's pretty darn close.
It's pretty darn close.
Pretty darn close. All right. Well, we're going to leave it at that because we got to find out what's coming up on the Hugh Hewitt show tonight. And I know I got to let you get going. I'm going to let you get going early, on time, I should say, for the first time, I think, in 3 weeks, because I know you're busy today. And you've got 4 presidential candidates coming up on the show?
We've got 4 presidential candidates. We've got, technically, we've got 3 presidential candidates and Rick Santorum. No, wait. No, that's not even exactly right. We've got 2 presidential candidates, Rick Santorum and Mike Huckabee. Well, technically, we've got 1. We've got 1 presidential candidate, and we have Governor Christie, we have Rick Santorum, and we have Mike Huckabee.
So you've got Marco Rubio coming on tonight. Is that what you're saying?
Well, technically, we've got John Kasich, we've got Chris Christie, we've got Rick Santorum, and we've got Mike Huckabee. So technically, it's Governor Day today. That's what we have today. It's Governor Day. We've got Governor Kasich, we've got Governor Christie, we've got Governor Huckabee, we have former Governor Sarah Palin on today.
Oh, is that right? Oh, very good. Okay.
We do. Laios will be here. John Dickerson, who tongue, no tongue, his choice, but he is getting a kiss on the lips because of how he handled the debate last time. And
I thought he did a
Rick,
good job. I thought Dickerson did
I
a
thought
good
he
job.
did a fine job.
Yeah, I have no problem with Dickerson's
Is
work on
is
that.
it tricky to run a debate with this many, with all sorts of different personalities on the stage? Yeah, it can be very tricky.
Well, I
Is
mean,
it
it was
hard?
Democrats too, so I mean, he was actually pretty sharp with them. So I mean,
Hey, he pinned Hillary down
he
and had
did.
her. I mean, when she was for the AUMF before she was against it. I mean, there's lots of stuff in there that she said that just made you go, "Did she really say that?" It it's
Yeah, good for
I
him.
had a wealth of information I drew from that
I
debate.
actually thought he'd do a pretty good job anyway. I mean, I kind of thought Dickerson would do a pretty good job.
He tries to shoot straight. I mean,
Yeah.
where is he ideologically? I can speculate, but he, like Chuck Todd, like a lot of people, they at least you know attempt to shoot straight.
Yep. So, all right. So that's coming up in an hour and 18 minutes on the Universe, HUGHNIVERSE.com. Duane Generalissimo Patterson is the master of the Universe, the troll-free web surfing experience for Hugh Hewitt listeners. I'm a member. You should be a member. You can watch the show unfold there. Duane, if they can't see it there and they're looking for it in the AM radio dial and can't find it there either, what should they do?
Well, they should threaten to bring Lindsey Graham because he doesn't seem to be as busy with without having to do debate prep and stuff. But bring Lindsey Graham along, and with that comes a promise of 10,000 ground troops. And I don't think that GM wants 10,000 ground troops storming his complex.
That's actually a pretty darn good idea. I think I'm going to leave it at that. But if that doesn't
Thank
work, and there's no reason why it shouldn't, you can always go to hughhewitt.com and listen to the audio stream if you're a cheap son of a gun. But then you don't get into the chat room, the after show. You don't get conservative LA radio tomorrow night. You don't get Duane FM on Sunday, Triple 12 on Saturday. All these fun things you miss out by not being a member of the Universe. So sign up for that right now. Universe.com. The URL is on the screen. Duane, we're going to try to do a show next week on Tuesday, an hour earlier at 3 Eastern Time, noon on the left coast.
From here.
From the studios. I'll be live in the studio with Duane Generalissimo Patterson at that time, so keep an eye out for it. We'll talk then. Duane Generalissimo Patterson, thanks for being with us. Have a great show tonight, sir.
See you guys.
See ya. All right. Duane Generalissimo Patterson has been my co-pilot for this part of the Ed Morrissey Show, and coming up next is my interview with Representative Frank Guinta. That was done earlier today before the vote on the SAFE Act, and we talked to him about three major issues. One was the refugee issues. The second was the election in New Hampshire, because I think it's fascinating. And third, very interesting. This is the first topic that you're going to hear is heroin addiction and Representative Guinta's efforts to form a bipartisan coalition to change the direction to end the scourge of heroin addiction in New Hampshire and other places. Now, I will warn you first off, though, that he's going to come in sounding kind of hot, and I had to adjust this in the first minute or so of the show. So if it comes in sounding loud and distorted, my apologies. Just prepare your ears for it because it's coming right now. My interview with Representative Frank Guinta. Joining me now on the line is Representative Frank Guinta, Republican from New Hampshire. And Representative Guinta, first off, thanks for coming on the Ed Morrissey Show today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Happy to be with you.
A few things that we want to discuss. One issue I think is really off the radar screen for people outside of New Hampshire, but that is a rising heroin problem. And I know that that's an issue that you are very, very concerned about. You were mayor of Manchester. You saw this problem in that regard. And now you're in Congress. What's going on with heroin usage in New Hampshire? And is this a nationwide trend that is just kind of below the radar screen for us?
Well, unfortunately, there are many states beyond New Hampshire that are impacted, and so we're trying to raise awareness in Congress so we can do a couple things. Number one, help those who are truly addicted, and secondly, put the right resources in place to identify those who are dealing and put those individuals in jail. I don't want to see what's happening in New Hampshire happen across the country, but we are seeing in Ohio and other states a very similar epidemic. And what we've seen in the last decade is a doubling of the abusers for heroin and a 500% increase in prescription opiate abuse. So that is a fundamental problem. And now, we've had a record number of overdoses, not just in our state's largest city, but in communities all over New Hampshire. It is a clear epidemic. I think it's an emergent issue that needs not just local, state, but also federal engagement.
Representative Guinta, I mean, right now the trend in the United States is towards more liberalization of drug laws, and I'm not talking about liberalization in terms of conservative versus liberal sort of thing, but just maybe a better way of putting it is a more libertarian approach to drug laws. For instance, you have a number of states that either have or are considering legalizing marijuana, and you get this impression that people are kind of thinking that this is not something that it's a personal use issue, even with albeit a smaller number of people, even with the harder drugs. And what's your perspective on that? I mean, is one connected to the other? First off, and
Sure.
and secondly, I mean, what's your perspective on that? What role does government have in blocking these types of?
It's an interesting question, and the dynamic in New Hampshire is somewhat unique in that we tend to be conservative, and we also tend to be libertarian. I mean, we are the live free or die state, and we tend to want government out of our personal business. That being said, I've looked at this issue of drug use through the eyes and the lens of being a father of a 12 and a 10-year-old and being mayor of the state's largest city, where I was also responsible for close to 17,000 students in the public school system. So I try to put this in a very logical and very simple question. Would you be proud of yourself if you proactively gave your children marijuana? And I think most people would answer that question and say no.
Yeah.
I don't believe that we should be legalizing marijuana. As a matter of fact, I was just at a school last week, and I was asked that very question by a high schooler, and that's how I answered the question. Would your parents be proud of you? Would they proactively give you marijuana? And when you ask the kids in that perspective, their response is, well, no, my parents wouldn't be proud of it, and they wouldn't give that to me. Parents understand the logic and the importance of explaining what drugs can do to you and how harmful they are. There are old studies and new studies that show the direct correlation between marijuana and further drug use. And when you put it in the context of the thousands of people in New Hampshire who are overdosing on heroin, I only wish that those who overdosed in heroin that started with marijuana never did it in the first place.
Right.
So I think we have to relook at and revisit this situation. I am very much in favor of helping somebody who is an addicted individual. We have an opportunity to create more drug or recovery courts, get them into a program, a long-term program, so we give them an opportunity to turn their life around. But I'm also tough on crime former mayor who will identify those drug dealers and want to put them in jail for a long time for violation of the law and putting people at risk, not just of harming themselves, but of killing themselves.
So you've heard Chris Christie talk about addiction issues on the campaign trail.
I have.
And so the approach that you are taking and some of your, this is a bipartisan effort that you are putting together in the House. Is that sort of like the Chris Christie model is to really focus on rehab and for the users and cutting off the I guess you call it the lines of communication for the heroin itself?
Yeah, it was interesting. As I created the congressional task force, it was sort of simultaneously Governor Christie had been talking about this issue on the campaign trail. I hadn't heard about it until I saw a clip of him, and I think he was in New Hampshire, and he was talking about this particular issue as it relates to a personal friend of his because of what the epidemic is in New Hampshire. So I got a chance to listen to what he had to say, and it's amazing how similar what he is talking about as a person and as a governor is what I'm trying to do on a legislative level. And I think it's because I was a former chief executive of our state's largest city. You tend to be on the ground and know exactly what's going on in your community and your neighborhoods. You see the hurt and the pain that families go through, and you see how addicts have no choice. That once they become addicted, they have very little choice unless and until we provide the appropriate treatment alternatives to drug abuse. So I think there is a willingness amongst communities to truly help those who are addicted, but send a very clear and a very strong message to that individual that's dealing that you are breaking the law, and we're going to use the full extent of the law to penalize you for that. So I think I look at this as an opportunity to help those who are truly in harm's way, who are addicted, but send a very strong message that look, this war on drugs is real. It's killing people, and rather than take that approach of legalizing, we've got to recognize that this is so harmful, so addictive, that we've got to take stronger steps to ensure that we win the war on drugs.
Well, we're going to have more on that in the show post, folks, and there'll be links to what Representative Guinta is doing on that. I want to move to the issue of the refugees, because it's obviously one of the big issues that's erupting this week is what do you do about the 10,000 or so refugees that the Obama administration wants to admit from Syria, especially in the wake of what happened in Paris on Friday, and frankly, in the wake of some failures of the refugee screening process from Iraq and Afghanistan. ABC News today republished their 2013 expose on this. What's the answer on refugees? Because Americans want to be welcoming and they want to be helpful, but they also want to be safe. And I think it's not unreasonable for people to want a refugee process to be as strictly vetted as humanly possible.
Well, America is a generous country and a country that is welcoming to immigrants and refugees. That is part of our heritage and tradition within our country, and it's been a long-standing tradition. We also have a constitutional obligation to protect our citizenry. And given the context of the bombings in Paris just last week, and the fact that ISIS has stated they want to infiltrate the United States through a refugee resettlement program, that needs to be taken seriously by our president, by Department of Homeland Security, and by Congress. And as we took a look at the current requirements and laws for the vetting process, what I found is that there are significant and serious gaps in that vetting process, and as a result, we need legislation to clarify that. So the House of Representatives is taking up the SAFE Act, H.R. 4038. We're going to pass that legislation, and we hope that the Senate will work with us to do everything we can to ensure the safety and security of America. And if that means, given the context of this war against ISIS, that unfortunately Syrian and Iraqi refugees have to, for a period of time, wait to come to the United States, unfortunately, that's something that we're going to have to do because of the fact that ISIS wants to infiltrate that process. And we have seen that they've already tried to infiltrate that process in other areas of the world. So,
right.
We've got to make sure that we take that threat seriously.
Representative Guinta, the Senate Democrats have come up with an alternative proposal that focuses on visas and visa travel and cracking down on those who have traveled to Syria and other ISIS infested areas as sort of an alternative. And it's been sort of assumed that this is more or less a cynical move that will give them some political cover to vote against the Republican proposal coming out of the House. But are you open to doing both at the same time? Because I don't really see what's mutually exclusive about those two issues, and I think they're actually both legitimate concerns.
Well, I think there are legitimate concerns there. We're trying to do one at a time, and we'll pass the SAFE Act today, the House feels that this is incredibly important because also of the comments that the president has made. First, that he doesn't feel that we should change our refugee resettlement policy. Secondly, he said that ISIS, as of last Friday, he said was contained. Clearly, they're not.
Right.
Third, he has said that we're not going to change our approach and our policy relative to ISIS. Given his comments, given the fact that ISIS had the significant bombing in Paris, and given the fact that ISIS has stated we would like to infiltrate the United States and specifically Washington, D.C., and now a new video is talking about an attack in New York and the fact that they want to infiltrate the refugee resettlement process, we felt in the House of Representatives that let's at least get the SAFE Act passed. Let's move it over to the Senate. This is one of several initiatives that we will take over the next several months to ensure our safety, ensure our security, and also review the visa process.
Your governor, Maggie Hassan, was one of the very few Democrats that actually said, no, we need to take a pause in the Syrian refugee program. As far as I know, she's the only Democratic governor to do so. I think almost all the other Republican governors have lined up behind that position, but I believe she's still unique in the gubernatorial ranks. You've had a couple of senators, Democratic senators, that have suggested that it might be wise to take a pause as well. Do you see that that position gaining strength, or is that going to be still pretty much a partisan fought issue on Capitol Hill?
Well, look, it's an interesting conversation that's happening amongst the Democratic Party right now. You have leaders like Chuck Schumer who have specifically stated, we may have to take a pause. But as you look at the debate going on relative to the SAFE Act, many Democrats are talking about the fact that the SAFE Act is not necessary. So our governor took a position that was a little bit different than what the Republican governors were saying. Our governor said, well, the President of the United States should rethink his position relative to 10,000 refugees from Syria being resettled in the United States in 2016. What I've called for, and I've sent a letter specifically to our governor asking, you need to specifically state that you will not allow those refugees to come to New Hampshire. And there's a big distinction, because if the president continues to want to do nothing, and not change the policy, which is what he said, it does no good to call on him to change his policy. So we need governors to specifically say, Mr. President, we are not going to take these refugees into our particular states because the federal government, has not demonstrated its capability to properly and fully vet these individuals. So there is a difference there between those two positions. I'm asking our governor to be far more specific and take further steps to make sure that if the president chooses to not change the position unilaterally, or if he chooses to veto our legislation, that she would stand up and say, look, as a governor, we cannot allow these individuals into our states at this time.
Congressman Guinta, I know we only got a couple more minutes, but I did want to ask you about the primaries, because New Hampshire's looking very interesting in the Republican presidential primaries. What's your take on the dynamics that we're seeing there? Because it looks like the establishment is taking a beating in New Hampshire, which may be not terribly surprising given the independent nature of New Hampshire voters anyway. But it doesn't look like anybody else but the outsiders are gaining much traction up there.
It's an interesting dynamic, and if you're somebody who is interested in following politics, it's amazing to watch. And I think that there's a number of things going on. First, there is a frustration with Washington, D.C. in general. And it's not just the parties, but it's just that Washington seems to not work the way people want it to. And I think that has a lot to do with the executive side. I was a chief executive of our state's largest city. You have to set a tone and tenor. And you're not going to get everything that you personally believe or want, but you've got to work with your legislative body. And the one thing that you'll hear even from Democrats in the House and the Senate is that the president does not spend a lot of time creating and establishing relationships with members of Congress, regardless of party affiliation, chooses to take hard lines on positions, will tend to blame as he's doing over the course of the last few days, Republicans as opposed to trying to find solutions. Leadership really, Ed, is about demonstrating a willingness to work with a group of people and lead them to a goal and to an objective. And the American public and people in New Hampshire voters are not seeing that. So as a result, I think they're looking for alternatives to the typical quote-unquote established type candidate. So you see people like Donald Trump, who continuously has led the polls in New Hampshire, and there's a new poll that came out this week that shows him with a significant lead, because I think he brings credibility to the table as a business person, as a successful business person. He has celebrity status as well, so he's got deep name recognition. And he's talking about issues in a very simplistic way that cuts through the political rhetoric. And I think that is appealing to people. So to be determined what happens on primary day in New Hampshire, that's not until February. That's a lifetime away.
Right.
But I think it is shocking and surprising to see the polls the way they have. And but I think that that's good for the process. It's good for the primary. It's good for energy and excitement and getting people engaged in the process. So time will tell, but it's been an interesting presidential primary process to this point.
It has been. I was up there. I was up in Manchester a few months ago, writing a book, doing some research on a book, and the book's coming out in April. But I'll tell you, I can't tell you too much about the book yet. But pragmatism was a big theme in New Hampshire about getting things done, finding ways to get things done. And so, yeah, I hear you on that. That's and I think that's reflected in the fact that people have just lost faith in the political process to actually accomplish things. So they're looking outside of the process. And yeah, I agree with you. I don't know if that's sustainable for Trump, but it's certainly interesting to watch, and it's going to be a fun ride coming down to February. So definitely, I think you're right on that.
And when you come back to Manchester, let me know. I'd love to get together with you in my home state. It's a great place, and obviously as the presidential campaign continues to gear up through the winter months, it'll be an exciting place to be.
It will definitely be, and thank you for the invitation. I will take you up on that the next time I'm out there. Representative Frank Guinta, thanks for joining us today.
Ed, my pleasure. Look forward to being back on with you.
And we're back now with Brian Blase of the Mercatus Center, George Mason University, who's written a very good article, a very timely article today about why the Affordable Care Act exchanges were more or less doomed to failure from the start, a fact that got driven home today by the fact that United Healthcare has decided to rethink its options for 2017. And this is a huge blow to Obamacare, to the entire system, if United Healthcare drops out after this year. And I think it's almost certain now that they will. Brian, welcome to the show. And let's start off by talking about the United announcement. I mean, they're going to cut back on their marketing for individual plans in 2016, which tells you they're already 1.5 steps out of this market already. But they're not going to offer plans for 2017, and that's going to impact in October 2016, right?
Yeah, Ed, well, first, thanks so much for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you and your audience about the work I did, and also, today's announcement. I think, what we are seeing is that the scheme that was put in place is not working, right? I mean, the way that Obamacare was supposed to work is that there were going to be enough young and healthy people coming into the markets, partly because of subsidies available for lower income people, and partly because of the individual mandates would bring in middle class and higher income people to offset the costs for sort of the sicker and older individuals that Obamacare made insurance a better deal for. And I think first we saw sort of 12 of the 23 co-ops go out of business and say they're not offering coverage in 2016. And now with United's recent announcement, we're just getting additional evidence that the basic scheme underpinning Obamacare is not sustainable, that there are not enough young and healthy people enrolling for coverage to prop the system up.
Well, and the reason for this, and this is actually the subject of my column today, which was written 2 days ago but published this morning about the same time that the news from United Healthcare came out, is that for people who are relatively healthy, this is the worst of both worlds. And I've been writing about this for 5 years, trying to explain what was going to happen when this was put in. It was that premiums were going to have to go up. The federal government was going to try to intervene on premiums, and the state governments for that. Well, we're going to have to intervene on premiums. And so then deductibles would go up because there's only so much money to go around in these risk pools. And if you are dumping a whole bunch of people who are utilizing the services here much more than had been happening in the past, then you have insurance companies would protect themselves by raising premiums, raising deductibles, or both at the same time. And so the New York Times finally figures this out. I believe it was on Saturday, which is, of course, the graveyard of news stories, especially when you talk about policy news stories. It's, Saturday's the graveyard of news stories. But they do finally run an article. It was a good article by Robert Pear, where they're talking to people who have either decided not to sign up at all or who have dropped their insurance because if you have a $5,000 deductible on top of $1,000 a month, right, even let's say $100 a month premium, you're spending $6,200 before you get your first benefit out of this thing. That is what we used to call, by the way, a catastrophic health plan. Only you paid a very small premium for it, and deductibles didn't enter into it because you could only use it when you were hospitalized or you had some sort of major health issue that had to be dealt with. So it was the worst of both worlds. And facing that situation, most consumers are making the fairly wise decision, at least for the healthy ones, to say, I'm not going to spend the money on this thing. I don't get any benefit out of it. Is that irrational?
Let me make two comments on that. One, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think the average deductible for single coverage for sort of the basic Obamacare Silver plan is over $3,000, and for a Bronze plan, which is slightly less generous, is about $5,000 or $6,000. And those deductibles. So Obamacare has a subsidy available to people below 200% of the poverty line that, in addition to sort of the premium subsidy that reduces the share of premiums people pay, if you are below 200% of the poverty line, 200% of the poverty line for a single person is about $23,000. They get generous subsidies to reduce those plan deductibles, co-payments, out-of-pocket limits. And generally what you're seeing is the only people that are signing up for Obamacare plans are people who receive these cost-sharing subsidies. So people who face more of the premium and the full deductible are just saying, Obamacare plans aren't worth the cost. They're not worth the $100 in premiums or more than that for coverage that has astronomical deductibles.
Right. So I mean the financial model of this is it's untenable. It's unsustainable.
Yeah. And the second point, I mean, I think, and this is, you got this from the explanations that United gave today, is Obamacare contained incentives for people to remain uninsured, right? I mean, the president talked about how Obamacare was going to reduce the number of people who lacked health insurance, and largely because there's been a huge expansion of the Medicaid program, which has a variety of problems. We have reduced the number of people without insurance. But Obamacare also allows people to obtain insurance coverage once they're already sick, right, at rates that don't reflect the fact that they are going to be more costly to insure. And, they tried to reduce this through open enrollment periods, but it seems that people are gaming the open enrollment periods. I mean, we have the United Health CEO today saying that they're finding that people are picking up coverage, using healthcare services, and then after they use the services, they're dropping coverage. And people are signing up outside of the open enrollment periods and sort of racking up a lot of bills that United just wasn't prepared for.
Right, they're not receiving the premiums for it.
So, and it's a perverse incentive, right? It is Obamacare providing an incentive for people to not act socially responsible, not be insured, because now we're reducing what the penalty is for people to not have health insurance.
Right. All of these things, by the way, were issues that were pointed out while this bill was being pushed through Congress. I mean, this is not This isn't a big surprise. Maybe the insurance companies got surprised by the extent of this, but part of the reason that they signed on to this is because in the first 2 years, it really was supposed to be a little bit longer than that, the federal government promised to indemnify them against losses through programs called the risk corridor programs. And they were collecting funds for this through certain taxes and other fixed forms of revenue. But also they were just supplementing these risk corridors with general fund money. And Congress forced them to stop doing that after the second year of Obamacare, and that the only money that they could use for the risk corridors had to come from the tax collections that were actually in the ACA. So they have a lot less money to do risk corridor bailouts, basically. These are corporate welfare payments, basically, to keep insurance companies in the program. And the end of that overspending on the risk corridors has coincided with decisions like United Healthcare pulling out, as well as slightly more than half of the co-ops that were originally founded for the ACA going out of business, almost all of which went out of business this year.
Yeah, so you're right to mention the risk corridor program. There's also sort of a reinsurance. It's called the reinsurance program, but basically it's a back-end subsidy for insurers that participate in the exchange, and it's funded by a tax on basically everyone that has group insurance, and HHS gets that money, and then they distribute it to insurers that are participating in Obamacare to offset the cost of the highest expense enrollees, and that gave insurers $8 billion in 2014. The risk corridor program, which you mentioned, is on top of that. So in addition to that $8 billion, insurers claimed almost $3 billion in excess losses that they wanted to get reimbursed for. But as you mentioned, Congress limited the administration's ability to pay out risk corridor payments beyond what insurers paid in. So insurers that made excess profits paid into the program, and there weren't that many insurers that made excess profits, right? Because they largely didn't price premiums high enough for the adverse risk pool that they enrolled. So there was a $2.5 billion shortfall, and you saw a lot of the co-ops, in particular, blame not receiving the full risk corridor payments that they anticipated as reason for them shutting down. But really, it was because they just didn't anticipate who was going to enroll and price their products appropriately. And I mean, I'm sure many of your listeners know the concept moral hazard. I mean,
yes,
these programs presented insurers with a moral hazard to underprice insurance plans to try to increase market share initially, and then because people don't like to change health insurance company, it's a hassle to then increase premiums over time once they had the market share captured. But insurers are finding out that that strategy wasn't necessarily a winning strategy because their losses were just so large,
right,
that they were unsustainable, and they're not able to really raise premiums enough.
I just wanted to circle back to one thing about the excess profits thing. This was part of the ACA's supposedly it's a bit of a social realignment part of the ACA, because the argument going into this was that health insurance companies were making so-called unconscionable profits by not providing for care, and that in order to avoid being penalized, I forget what percent it was. I want to say 85%, but I might be wrong about that. But it was in that range of your revenues had to be spent on care. So you had whatever was left had to go to administration and whatever profit you could squeeze out of this. But the thing was that there wasn't that much margin in this business to begin with. And the ACA created mandates which made administration costs go up significantly for insurance companies. This was one of these pieces in there that I think, and maybe Brian, you can correct me on this if I'm wrong on this, but it was one of those pieces, maybe not the most prominent of pieces, but was one of those pieces that really demonstrated that the people who were trying to reform the system, I'm using scare quotes now, Brian, I'm on camera, so I can use the scare quotes, trying to reform the system, didn't really understand the system.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I mean, the provision that you're talking about is the minimum loss ratio, and that the administration thought that they needed to force insurers to spend at least 80% of their money on claims, because insurers were without that requirement they would just pocket too much profit, right? Sort of
right.
Not appreciating that competition would lead to lower premiums over time. I think, the big story and sort of the part of the main takeaway from what I found, and I looked in my paper back at what was predicted would happen in 2010 when the law passed, and several organizations made projections about enrollment and who would enroll, and for 2016. Those organizations basically projected about 25 million people would be signed up for exchange coverage. And the administration last month downgraded that to 10 million people.
Right.
So much lower enrollment, largely because these plans aren't as attractive as was assumed. And in particular, you're getting lower enrollment from the younger, healthier, and middle and upper class people. So the only people that really are enrolling in the exchange plans are people that, one, receive huge subsidies to offset their premiums as well as their deductibles, or that have expensive healthcare conditions that basically benefit from the way the regulatory structure in Obamacare works. But it just doesn't seem like it's going to be sustainable without changes, because they were relying on getting these young and healthy people into the markets, and it's just not happening.
Well, Brian, I know we got to let you go, but one last question for you: is this a sustainable market, or is this thing going to collapse in the next couple of years?
So we discussed reinsurance and risk corridors. I think the last year that insurers have the protection of reinsurance is 2016. So next year's premiums that they set will be for the 2017 plan year. And I think you're going to see significant premium increases. I think you're going to see insurers leaving the market. And I think you're going to see, a situation in the individual market where an adverse selection death spiral, which you have higher premiums and enrollment of really only the people that have expensive healthcare needs, is definitely a realistic scenario. And Obamacare is going to have to be revisited. We can't have the individual insurance market throughout the entire country disintegrate. Right? People want to buy health insurance. It's a good that people place value on, and we. I think are in real danger of adverse selection death spiral in the individual market.
And of course, 2016, that open enrollment period starts the 1st of October, which is about 5 weeks ahead of the election. And that makes it even more interesting, I think.
I think you're right.
Yeah. Brian Blase of the Mercatus Center, George Mason University. We've got the links in the show post. Thank you so much for being with us today, sir. Great to have you on. Hopefully we get a chance to bring you back on and talk a little bit more about this.
I would love to do that. Thanks so much for having me, Ed.
Thank you, sir.
Bye.
All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up here. No, I'm not going to install, well, I guess I could probably install because I'm not because I'm not going to use Skype again after this. I want to thank the folks in the chat room for being patient with all things today, and want to also remind people that next week, it's Thanksgiving week, we're going to try to do a show from Hugh Hewitt Studios. We're going to do it an hour earlier than normal, so look for it at 3 Eastern Time, 2 Central, noon on the left coast, and I'll be live in Duane Studio, so it'll look a little different. We won't have the slides up that we do right now. We'll be using the Universe, basically. So we'll be doing a lot of plugging in the Universe, and I think what we'll try to do is we'll try to get Andrew on so we can do both Duane and Andrew at the same time and have a great conversation about national politics. So we'll look out for that on Tuesday. We'll figure out what we're going to do about bringing Andrew on and all that kind of fun stuff. Also want to thank the folks running the chat room. Oh, Generalissimo is in the chat room. I did not realize that. I don't know if he's paying attention, but he is in the chat room, so I have to stop talking bad about him. Let's see. Cranky T-Rex at Cranky T-Rex on the Twitterses. CrankyTrex.blogspot.com is where he blogs. He's at buzzpo.com and also occasionally at hotair.com. We love it when he writes there. Jeff Dunitz from thelidblog.com now, but you can also go to jeffdunitz.com. He's at Yidwithlid on the Twitterses. And, my cousin TR4A, I had actually made him gave him a troll gun today, but I guess it must have dropped out, but he's in there. My cousin Mike, always great to see Mike in the chat room. I guess before we start doing the walking music, don't know if I have an update or anything like that on the book, but don't forget Going Red is coming out April 2016. There is a link in the show post that will take you to the Amazon thing for that. We love pre-orders. In a couple of weeks, we're going to start working on some of the marketing. I think you'll see a website pop up. We'll obviously be doing a couple things at Hot Air for that. I'll have the cover because it's not quite set yet what the cover is going to look like. But again, we love pre-orders. If you haven't had a chance to pre-order the book, please go over to Amazon. You can pre-order the hard copy, the hardback. You can do the Kindle. You can do the Audible version of Going Red. And there is a cover that's up there, and that's more than likely what the cover is going to look like. There may only be one small change to it by the time we actually, get this set. We'll figure it out. All that will be figured out. Things will be popping up soon on this. So I'm assuming kind of like maybe the week of the debate for the Republican debate in December 15th in Las Vegas, which by the way, I'll be at. I'm actually going to that debate, so I'll be in Las Vegas for that. Maybe about that point in time, we'll start looking at a little bit more publicity for this, and we'll have a little strategy about rolling out the cover and all that kind of fun stuff. Question in the chat room. Are you reading the audio version yourself? The answer to that is yes. I will be reading my own book. So when you get the Audible, you will be hearing my voice on the Audible version of the book. So one of the things that we have to do is we have to schedule up when I'm going to go into a studio to do that sort of thing, because it will take some time in a studio to get that done. So I'll probably have to take a couple of days off of the blog to get to make sure it happens correctly. But yes, and I will be reading the audio version myself. So that is one thing that I can definitely tell you. Doing my best, Morgan Freeman. I wish. If I would like to come up with a product just so I could get one of two people to do voiceovers for it. Morgan Freeman's one of them, and the other one is, now I can't think of his name. Sam Elliott. Sam Elliott is the other one I'd want to do it for. Have do it. Just because their voices are so good. They've got such great voices. So, all right. I also want to thank the rest of the people in the chat room, but let's go ahead and play a little walking music to ease us down the road here. Make sure it's not too loud here, that might be just a bit loud. All right, who else has been in the chat room? Let's don't forget to put Sam Elliott, Fausta from faustusblog.com. Yeah, see, I hit the nerve. Sam Elliott, great voice. Sam Elliott is voicing a T-Rex in The Good Dinosaur next week. Well, there you go. He was also in The Big Lebowski. All right, who else has been in the chat room? Don't forget to put your own URLs up in the chat room. We're all about shameless blog promotion here at the Ed Morrissey Show. Greg Nichols, one of the fabulous tribbles, also my Hugh cruise mate. Say that 5 times fast. It's Fausta from faustusblog.com. Great Western Hemisphere blog. I read her every single day. I am not kidding about this. If you're not reading Fausta, you should be. Guelph, Ironked, Juanito Cabron, Mr. Fastbucks, another one of the fabulous triples here. Hanging out in the chat room. My sister's brother, Prairie Dog SD, my cousin Mike, TR4A. Thanks for having the troll gun at least for a little while, Mike. I don't know what happened. Via Paso at the Ancestral Morrissey Manse. My mom. And the first mate behind me, keeping me on the straight and narrow. Don't forget, next Tuesday, a special time for a special edition of the Ed Morrissey Show. A very special edition of the Ed Morrissey Show. 3 p.m. Central, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, 2 p.m. Central, noon on the left coast. Until then, have a great weekend, folks, and don't miss a minute of the Ed Morrissey Show. We'll see you later.